Hey everyone, welcome back to Reissued. If you're new here, my name is Andrew. I haven't made an art video here on my channel in a hot minute. I think the last one that I made was back in February, before Chicago, before Italy, before I had procrastinated about it for a couple months. Yeah, getting back into creating visual art has been on my list for a minute, and I keep dropping that down to the bottom and pushing other things up to the top. It feels like the longer I don't do it, the harder it is to get started. Now, I've seen some great comments on some of my past art making videos where people are saying, I haven't made some art in a while, now I feel re-inspired, my confidence is renewed, I have some new ideas. And so I thought for this video, I would talk you through some of the advice that I'm giving myself as I jump back into art making for the first time in a couple months. Hopefully I'll get my groove back, hopefully you'll enjoy the process and maybe find your groove too. Let's get started. Okay, so 3 quick little tips / thoughts to start out here. Number 1, just because you haven't made art in a while doesn't mean that you're no longer an artist. I know that's kind of a confidence thing that happens for me where it feels like I'm out of practice on something. I'm like, maybe I can't do it anymore. Maybe any skill that I had just flew out the window. And of course, when you do something more often and you're in the practice of doing it, it feels easier and your skill level is maybe a bit higher and you kind of find a flow. But that doesn't mean that taking a couple days, weeks, months, years off will totally erase your skill set or the unique perspective and passion that you bring to your artwork. So we'll let that thought go. Tip number 2, take the pressure off. Now, on most of my art making videos, I do post the pieces on my website right away and have them be for sale right away. I'm gonna go ahead and commit to not doing that for this video. While I would appreciate the extra income, selling my work right away creates a lot of noise in my head surrounding like, is this good? Will anyone wanna buy this? How much is it gonna cost to ship this giant painting? And while I'm generally able to hold those thoughts in my head and hold on to my creativity, right now I feel like that's creating a block, and so let's push that block out of the way and just focus on making something that I wanna make. And then tip number 3, put the pressure back on. So I'm the kind of person that if I don't have any kind of parameters or any kind of deadline, it doesn't get done. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that a week from today, I will make something. Maybe it's just one piece, maybe it's crap, but it's out there, it's made. I have to do it.
All right, tip number 4 is to go somewhere that makes you feel inspired. Maybe that's a museum, maybe that's like a natural environment. For me, that's the thrift store, which is why I'm currently in the Goodwill parking lot. I have been known to incorporate thrifted pieces into my artwork before, so of course I'm gonna keep an eye out for some options for that. But more than anything, the thrift store is just a place that I feel creative and that feels full of possibilities. And that's the mindset that I wanna have going into my work today. So let's go inside and see what they have.
So I did walk out empty-handed. I didn't find anything at the thrift store. I did have a lot of other ideas for other things, which brings me to tip number 5, limit your options. My head is in like 10 places and I need to narrow that focus and commit to one thing and move forward. So I'm gonna limit myself to anything that I have in my house right now. I have a lot hanging around, so we might have to limit it a bit more than that. But let's go through what I already have and see if we can choose a direction to move in. So I often start my process working on top of a piece of thrifted art.
These are some pieces that I got. I think I bought this one just for the frame. I really like the way that this looks, but there's like a hard line here down the center where it's discolored, so can't really use that one as is. I think this is the only framed piece that I have right now. I often work on top of a piece that's already framed, but not really feeling this today. And then over on this end, I have a bunch of books that I got at the REISSUED last week. We were rearranging the books, and some of the stuff was gonna go in the trash because it's not easily sellable. And so I, of course, had to buy them myself and rescue them because I thought they were interesting. These ones are kind of like a lot of like old religious art. Definitely feeling this vibe after going to Italy. You know, the kind of architecture and more religious artifact kind of feeling. I think that could be fun to work with at some point. I also pulled this 1980s American Heart Association book. I liked a lot of the kind of anatomical drawings in here, especially of like the circulatory system and the heart and such. This one, I mostly just liked the hand here on the front, but there are a couple of interesting graphics on the inside, and I kind of like the punchy orange color scheme. These three I picked up at a vintage store in Chicago. Often with my portraits, I'll just find images online and print them, but I've been wanting to move into working from the original photographs themselves. Even if I photocopy them and blow them up, I think that the uniqueness of actually finding an image and working from that is somewhere that I've been wanting to go, so we could work with that. And then in a similar vein, I got this yearbook from 1960 from Georgia State, and I just think a lot of the imagery in here is really interesting. Both with the portraits themselves, but also some of this, like some of the photography itself, the angles and the way that it's edited is kind of interesting, like this. Super cool, right?
Okay, so based on what I found, I want to start working with the vintage yearbook and see how that goes. My strategy here is going to be to flip through the yearbook and just find things that are interesting, delicately remove the pages, and then scan them. Generally, with thrifted materials like this, I would just cut apart the books themselves entirely and use the images as a part of the original artwork. However, I'm feeling a little bit non-committal, and I'm also feeling like these might be images that I want to use multiple times or play with the scale or go with a larger scale maybe. So scanning the images and playing with them a little bit digitally would be something that I haven't done before, and that feels kind of exciting. Which brings me to tips number 6 and 7. Number 6, go with something that you know. I've definitely worked with vintage photos before, especially portraits. This is something that feels comfortable to me, but yet still feels exciting. I feel like there's more to tap into. But tip number 7, if you're jumping back into art making for the first time in a while, is to do something different. I find that if I try to do the same thing that I've done before already, then I'm sort of subconsciously comparing my work to past work, and that's a dangerous game when it feels like you'll never make something that's as good as what you've done in the past. So going in a new direction is going to take things away from things that I know and make it different from anything that I've done, and therefore we can't really compare it, right? Okay, so it's the end of day 1. The day kind of got away from me. I was busy planning future projects and doing other things. I did go through the yearbook and cut out some pages that I really liked, and then self-doubt massively set in, and so I'm feeling a little paralyzed and not sure what to do next. But yeah, just in general right now, I feel like my brain is in 10 places and I need to sort of like find a groove. I haven't found it yet, but that's why we're here, right? Alright, welcome back everybody. I have been doing some serious thinking and soul searching over the last couple of days on these pieces, and I think I have a plan. But it took quite a bit of figuring, and we already talked about kind of narrowing down inspirations, narrowing down materials. Arriving at a solid idea for how to move forward with these was about narrowing down the concepts. So I pulled a bunch of images out that I thought were interesting, and through the process of sorting, categorizing, and then minimizing, I've been able to kind of narrow down the scope a lot where it feels less overwhelming and a little bit more manageable. Let me show you.
So I laid out all of the images that were inspiring to me and noticed that they started to fall into specific categories. So over here we have these like full page yearbook type things that I thought were very graphic and more about kind of a background. Similarly, these ones in this section here, not necessarily any particularly interesting subject, but they just kind of create an atmosphere to support another image possibly. Then this category here feels a little bit like these people were really posed for the camera. It's like they're kind of modeling or trying to create a certain kind of image. And then with this section, these were people that I felt were kind of caught in a moment. They're not really posing for the camera, they're just kind of in the process of doing something, and then this moment just kind of happened, you know? She looks like she's lost in thought. And then we came to these two images here. Both of these feel a little bit like a moment just happened and someone said, smile for the camera, and then that moment was captured. So yes, they're posed, but something happened just before or just after that feels kind of like a caught moment. So it's somewhere in between. So we're gonna narrow in and focus just on the couple that's dancing together. With a bit of a plan in place, I went in last night and scanned these in on my scanner on like the highest resolution possible so that when I blow them up, they don't get too pixely. I think when I blow these up, the images will be kind of dotty since this was printed on like an old printer, so the resolution is not amazing, but I'd rather see the specific dots of the original printing rather than the pixelations of a bad scan. Do you know what I mean? So I picked up a couple of new old pieces at the REISSUED yesterday. I'm hopeful that the dimensions will work for what I'm thinking of, but I just felt like I needed something to start on top of. But yeah, I'm gonna get to work doing kind of my normal thing here, blowing up the images, printing them out, cutting them out, and then kind of laying them out on top of these frames to see what we're working with. So I've made some decisions, and I think I'm gonna use the dog and this mat that came out of a frame that I used for my framing hacks video. I wanted something a little bit smaller and it would be behind glass. I'll have to find another frame for this, but these are gonna be exactly the same proportions, but the feel will obviously be very different since one is gonna be painted and a little bit messier and this one's gonna be a bit neater. So I saw a video recently on Facebook Reels where someone took like a honeymoon image of someone on like the beach on this tropical island, and it was kind of zoomed in on just the couple, and they pasted that to a background and then proceeded to paint in a much larger image as though you zoomed the camera out, and they color matched it perfectly and the painting just seamlessly blended in with the surroundings. And so it was sort of like the AI fill thing that happens in Photoshop, only they were doing that manually. And at the time I thought, wow, that's a really interesting concept, maybe I can do something with that. And so what we're gonna be doing here today is removing parts of the image, you know, tearing them away, cutting them away, I do that a lot, but then sort of refilling them with something else, right? So rather than taking it to a literal place where we're reconstructing exactly what was there before, maybe we sketch it in, maybe it looks a little bit different than it did before, maybe it's more about kind of broader concepts, like the way that moment felt or the impression of that thing rather than what that thing actually looks like. And so in a way, I'm thinking a little bit about how one person is remembering the other person, how they're remembering that moment, and how the brain kind of fills in those foggy areas with its own interpretation, like a dream, kind of. So it's a little bit more conceptual this time. A lot of times when I do this kind of work, I just kind of like put things down, tear it apart, see what happens, and move forward with the concept sort of organically. But this time I do have kind of a specific idea in my mind of what we're trying to do conceptually, which is a little bit intimidating, but also presents a cool opportunity to kind of tell a story here and share a feeling. All right, on to my next tips. Even though every creative process is different, you start to notice patterns. So I think this is the point in the process where it's really important to be kind to yourself, to be flexible, and to really follow your inspiration and allow your intuition to lead. So yes, this has taken longer than my original timeline. I spent basically a whole week kind of putting the pieces together and trying different things. I did a couple of sketches in charcoal. I made sure to seal those with a spray sealant so that they won't run all over the place when I coat them in glue. I sourced a broad range of collage pages from both my contemporary magazine collection and also a 1940s typewriter textbook, some of my mechanical drawing books. I also did some writing, putting some things that I had written down onto notebook paper and newsprint.
I also experimented with colorizing parts of my photograph with watercolor pencils, kind of like in a 1940s Technicolor, or where they recolored film, that kind of look. I just thought that would sort of bridge the gap between the black and white images and these more colorful elements that I was introducing. And then I went real crazy and did some super weird, childlike scribbly drawings, just because I felt like I had a certain feeling and a certain story that I was trying to evoke, and I wanted to assemble the right palette to get me there. So I feel like I have a pretty good palette laid out. So now we're gonna jump in with my Mod Podge. We're gonna get to gluing these things, layering them up, tearing them away. This is the part that feels familiar to me, but also this is kind of the critical moment where we really start to get a sense of how the piece is gonna look. So I'm gonna put on some music, find a flow, and just go. It's funny, we talked about comparing your past work to your next work and how it feels sometimes like you're not going to be able to match the work that you've made in the past. I think similarly, I tend to idealize my creative process in the past. It's easy once a piece is made to look back in the process and be like, yeah, I knew the whole time it was going to be great. But the reality when I really think about the creative process for each piece that I've made in the past is that I felt just as unsure, just as insecure, and so this feeling right now in this process is really nothing new. And so my next tip here is to authentically remember your past creative process. Again, I think that we idealize being in a flow when really a flow is about being used to the discomfort of creative process. So I'm not as used to it right now, but that doesn't mean that this is not a normal part of the process. Do you know what I mean? Alright everybody, we are more or less done here. I say more or less, I'm gonna hold off on signing and sealing these in case I wanna make a couple of changes down the line. I just wanna leave it open-ended for now, but I am gonna show you where we are at this point. I'm really happy with what I was able to achieve here. On the larger piece, it feels a bit more like a sensory experience or a memory. I'm thinking of it kind of from his perspective of how he remembers her as this collection of sunsets and skies and home. And on the smaller piece, there's this sense of planning and hoping and expectations. And I think of that piece as sort of her perception of him as a collection of future plans and hopes and goals. And so my 14th and final tip/goal here is to let go of expectations. When I started this process almost 2 weeks ago, I had no idea how deep I was gonna fall into the creative process this time, how I was gonna be inspired, how much this work would be both a departure from and culmination of all the work that I've really done on my channel here in my art making in the last year. And so I'm letting go of expectations about what these pieces would be and what this video would be, and just embracing how things turned out. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more art making here on my channel, be sure to hit the like button. If you want to catch up on my home renovation, my DIY projects, and my past art videos, be sure that you're subscribed. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.